Okay, so I see us on YouTube. Can everybody still hear me okay? Somebody say something?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so it looks like we're up on YouTube. And so for anybody who is watching on YouTube, we're still waiting on, oh, here's Yvonne. Okay, welcome, Yvonne. So it looks like we do have now all of the committee members who are going to be here today. Bill King will not be joining us. Thank you, Marty, for sending that chat to the waiting room. And so now we'll start off just with a quick agenda review before getting into the substance of the meeting. So we've got member comments, concerns at the beginning. On the printed agenda, there was the minutes from the November 10th meeting. I'm going to, we can see if anybody has any questions or comments, but I'm not going to go into the minutes in detail. As you all saw, Susan Brock added a lot of information to the minutes, so I'm going to give folks an extra month to review all of that, and we'll vote on those minutes in our January meeting. But if anybody did take a look and had any questions tonight, I will see if anybody has any questions. And then we'll have a quick item on potential changes to the Energy Code supplement revisions, which Marty can tell us a little bit about. There is a memo from Nick in the packet, and then we'll continue our discussion of the telecommunications law and go over a few items under that. And then we'll do other business, discussing next year, 2022. And I do want to make sure that I leave some time there. I'm actually probably going to try to end the meeting around 7 tonight. And but I will leave a little bit of time at the end so we can talk about 2022. So with that as our agenda, anybody have any questions on the agenda? And so we will start with agenda item number 1, member comments or concerns. Do any committee members want to say anything to us aside from what we'll be talking about in the next agenda items? And I don't see anybody waving their hands or jumping up and down, so I'll assume no. And I will then move into the minutes section and see, did anybody want to say anything or ask any questions if you did get a chance to look at the minutes? As I said, we won't be going into detail or taking a vote on them. But if anybody did want to bring up anything about them, you could do so now.
I just want to say that I found them very helpful and very detailed, and it was a pleasure to read it.
Okay, anything else on the minutes? So if not, we'll go on to let me find where my agenda is here. The discussion of the potential energy code supplement revisions. And so those were in the packet. In my packet, it looks like it's starting on page 6 of the packet. There's the memo from Nick dated December 1st. And we've got the just the overview, and then he's listed the potential amendments. And it's actually, there's quite a lot, or actually, no, I guess I'm looking at something. So looks like, yeah, it's about just a 1-page memo. And so the purpose tonight was just to give you a heads up We don't have actually any of the detailed language drafted yet for these changes. So this is just sort of a quick summary of what will be coming. But we wanted to give you an idea of where we were in the process. And maybe I'll ask Marty to start off by just explaining what's happening with the state. And was there something that was supposed to happen last Friday? Was it, Marty?
Yes. So the New York State Codes Council reviews these applications and these filings from municipalities. And so we were hopeful that we would be heard last Friday. They seem to receive quite a bit of outpouring from several municipalities around the state, adopting more restrictive energy code laws like the stretch code. And due to the high volume that the state has received, we were actually bumped to the March meeting, so March of 2022 at this point in time. So we will present at that meeting. We provided them with documentation on how it is more stringent or how it does not affect the uniform provisions. And in doing so, we found a couple items in the current Ithaca Energy Code supplement that was actually less stringent than the current energy code provisions, the New York State Energy Code provisions. So, in our due diligence, Nick and I and gentlemen from the city said we should modify these because we can't have it less stringent than the New York State provisions, which is what basically kicked off this memo. It deals with the right lighting aspect of the Ithaca Energy Code supplement.
And so, yeah, as you can see from Nick's memo, the proposed amendments number 1 and 2 are to help us with the state, because we can't have our energy code supplement being more stringent. And then number 3, 4, and 5 are other small amendments that Nick wants us to consider, since we're going to be amending it anyway. So I guess at this time, I'll just see if anybody has any quick questions. We can pass on to Nick as he starts to prepare for our January meeting. Susan, I did see that you had emailed one comment, so I don't remember whether Nick was copied on that, but we'll make sure Nick gets that. Anybody have any questions or any thought that they want to express now? No. Yvonne, are you talking, or oh, okay. And so if not, then yeah, we'll move on, because as I said, we'll be getting actual language in January that we can look at, and this was just a heads up. So moving on in the agenda, then we'll go on to item number 4 of discussing the updates to the town's telecommunications law. And so we'll start off with a report on the town of Fishkill that you've heard us talk about before. And so first I'll have Susan Brock and Chris give us any thoughts from their viewing of the town of Fishkill's meeting video. And then we can talk about some of the issues brought up in the other materials that are attached here in our packet. For those who are watching us on YouTube now, for the public that's interested in this, as I had mentioned earlier, we won't be having any public comment at today's meeting. I think that I will allow public comment at the January meeting. So if you're here to make a comment, we won't be taking it tonight. Just so you know, we'll be talking at the end of this meeting about our schedule for 2022. If we keep the same schedule and meet on the second Wednesday of January, that would be January 12th, I believe. Wednesday, January 12th. But just check in on the town's website to make sure before you come to that meeting on January 12th to make sure it actually is happening on that date. And as I said, I think that I will allow public comments at the beginning of that meeting. We will still at that time, I believe the governor's executive order goes through January 15th. So we will still be doing meetings by Zoom and broadcasting on YouTube at the beginning of January. And so any public comments would be done through Zoom. So with that preface, we'll get in now to the substantive discussion of the changes and updates to our telecommunications law. And so let's start off with Susan Brock giving us an update on what Fishkill is doing, and Chris can add anything, and then we'll see what questions people have on that before we start to look at any specific changes we might want to do to our law. Okay, Susan Brock.
Okay, so Andrew Campanelli drafted a revised law for Fishkill back in October. He had sent them his initial draft, and then based on some feedback and other things, he revised it. And if anybody goes to the Fishkill website and downloads the meeting packet for the town board meeting, their town board meeting on December 1st, the old version is in there, not the new. If you poke around on their website long enough, you can find the revised version. And the way you know it's the revised version is there were a number of provisions that were not filled out. They just said reserved in the October version. And now there are substantive provisions for some of those provisions that had been reserved. There are still one or two sections that say reserved, most notably the ADA accommodation section. But the town of Fishkill held a public hearing on their law. No one spoke, so they closed the public hearing. I don't know though that they think this is the final version yet. They didn't really say. Actually, I should take that back. They didn't close the public hearing. They extended it to December 15th, I believe was their next meeting. And I just don't know if they anticipate more changes on the law or not. Andrew Campanelli addressed the board and talked to them about some of the changes he had made. He had added design standards, just some other things like that. Some of the things that had been in the old law that people wanted brought over, people meaning like the planning board, and at the town had a consultant too. So some things just that are already in our law too that you might want to carry over, at least for the larger facilities like parking, lighting, fencing, that type of thing. So those were the changes. Nothing hugely of interest to us particularly, besides maybe our looking at the design standards that he put in to see what they are. But one thing he didn't call out were the setback requirements, which he had left blank in the October version because he wanted the town board to make that determination as to what they wanted the setbacks to be. And you might remember at our meeting last month, I went into some detail about that. And he had finally agreed that he would put in 300 feet for setbacks to residential facilities everywhere in the town. That the town board wanted to go as high a number as they could. And that was sort of the highest he was willing to go. And he says, as long as that doesn't effectively prohibit them from being everywhere in residential areas, that he would put that in. So the version that is on the website now, the revised version, does have setbacks, but what was interesting is it says within all residentially zoned districts, all small wireless facilities shall be set back a minimum of 300 feet from any residential dwelling or structure unless the facility is being installed upon a pre-existing utility pole or is being co-located upon a pre-existing personal wireless service facility. And then he has another provision within the non-residential zones. Their zones are things like industrial, general business, shopping, that kind of thing. And there the minimum setback shall be 50 feet unless the facility is being installed upon a pre-existing utility pole or other utility structure. So I think that means that there is no setback requirement for the small wireless facilities that are put on pre-existing utility poles or are co-located on a pre-existing personal wireless service facility. Otherwise, in the residential zones, it's 300 feet, and in the other zones, it's 50 feet. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know how that came to be, that it was written that way, but that's something we might want to follow up with Fishkill on. In fact, I talked with Chris about that a little earlier today, that maybe she can reach out to their planners and just find out what's going on with that, which, you know, she might be able to do for the January meeting. I don't want to speak for you, Chris, but I think that would be interesting to find out why that exception was put in. So I think that's pretty much it for Fishkill. They're still working on it. We'll hold their next public hearing on December 15th, and I'll be on the lookout to see if they have yet another revised version that gets put onto their website, and see if any of these provisions that are still reserved, like the ADA provision, whether those are filled in or whether they just stay as placeholders and get adopted without anything in there for now. Bill, mute.
Bill, you're muted.
Yeah, got too many screens and windows going on. Chris, you want to add anything?
I don't necessarily want to add anything related to the Fishkill report. I will reach out to the Fishkill planners, and I hopefully will have something to report back to the committee in January.
And anybody got any questions for Susan about what they've heard? If not, then let's go on to the packet. Let me get up my packet. And so one of the things that I know we did ask for last time was we asked for a new map. If you recall, last month, we looked at maps with a 250-foot radius around residences and also a 1,500-foot radius. And then after some of our discussion, we asked for a new map with a 300-foot radius around residences. And so why don't we just take a quick look at that, and then we can go through some of the other materials. We've got in my packet, the map was on page 13.
Do you want me to share my screen, Bill?
Yeah, that actually might be helpful, because then it'll show up on YouTube for people who are watching on YouTube, and we won't leave it up for the whole time, but just so people
Let me just find it.
watch it.
I have the whole packet up here.
And
Oops.
and
Sorry.
for those,
Actually, that's not working the way it should.
let's see. I'm trying to figure out if I can share it somehow.
Okay, no, I've got it. It just took a while to load. Okay, that's not it. I think it is before.
I think it was at the
Nope.
very end. Yeah.
You're right. Okay, avert your eyes. There we go.
Is this? I'm trying to remember. Is the packet on our website, Chris?
Yes, the
So-
entire packet is on our website.
So anybody from the public who is watching on YouTube or who's not used to it, you can find our meeting packets on the town's website. So the materials that we're reviewing, you can pull up on your computer if you have one. So yeah, so this was the new map showing the 300-foot radius around residences in the town of Ithaca. And
Right.
did you want to say anything, Chris? Or did
Yeah,
I-
let me,
Mhm.
sorry about that. Yes, just quickly, Ben Coakley created this map, and he said essentially the difference between this map and the 250-foot radius is if I zoom in close enough into this map, there's a thin gray line basically around the bubbles. That is approximately the equivalent of about 50 feet. It's an approximate, but he mentioned it just to let me know that there's not a whole heck of a lot of a difference between 250 and 300 feet.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Yeah, compared to the 1,500-foot radius map.
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar to the 250-foot radius. It's interesting. There is in the northeast there, it looks like there's just a little bit where the I guess it must be where one of the schools is there. There's a blank spot. And then Sapsucker and then the old Lucente property down below Sapsucker Strip. Anybody have any questions on the map? Okay, so then we'll stop sharing that. And let's see. So also in the packet here, we've got the approval process and aesthetic requirements, I see.
Yep.
And so that's what we had worked on last year, or actually a year and a half ago almost now.
Yeah, the committee finalized their decision in June of 2020. And the approval process and aesthetic requirements were related to all wireless facilities, regardless of whether they're small cell or towers or whatnot. And this went along with the flow chart that we created, which was also finalized around the same time. And it talked about what the committee felt should be reviewed internally by planning staff and what the committee felt should be reviewed by the planning board.
And so, because if I recall, that was one of the questions that we wanted to discuss with people based upon some of the review of the Fishkill law in trying to figure out who's going to be the gatekeeper. Is that how they were referring to it, Susan? Who's the gatekeeper? Or
Yes, that's how they refer to it. I don't know if those words are used in their law, but that's how Andrew Campanelli was referring to it at the meeting. Who receives the applications, reviews them for completeness, notifies the appropriate boards or other staff that they're there, so that and just make sure that, you know, if the application is incomplete, that the applicant is notified of that, because there's very short time limits to send out that notice of incompleteness. And if you do that, it tolls the shot clock. So the shot clock stops running until they then submit the information that was requested. So it's a pretty important role, because if you miss your time to notify them that it's incomplete, then you can't ask for more information.
So if I may, Bill,
Yeah.
Planning staff and code staff met to talk about this, and traditionally it's been planning staff that has been reaching out to the telecommunications applicants and creating the emails and the letters that list all of the incomplete aspects of the project and the submission requirements to get on our planning board and whatnot. So we think that it should probably remain as that. I know Fishkill looks like they've got the applications go to the building inspector, but for the town of Ithaca, it's more appropriate for it to start with planning staff. The planning department, we should say.
And should we look at our charts again just to refresh people's memories about what we had said a year and a half ago?
Sure. Do you want me to share my screen again?
Yes, if you
Okay.
could do that.
Okay, I will do
And
that.
while Chris is doing that, I just want to give a caveat that sort of rattling around in my mind is that maybe one, or at least one of the charts, that maybe we need to make another change, just in terms of timing or something like that, that's required by the law. So it's been a long time since we've looked at these. I just need to look at them again. So I just would give a caveat. I don't think we should consider them final in terms of saying, these are all the legal requirements, these are all the timing requirements and things like that. Just so you know that. And it's fine,
Okay.
For this purposes here, figuring out who's responsible for being the gatekeeper and things like that. But I don't want you or the public to get the impression this is the absolute final version.
Okay, that's understood. So what you're looking at right now, it's a 2-page chart. It's going to be too hard to show both pages on one screen, so we're just going to go one by one. This particular one starts with the question of whether the proposed facility is co-located onto an existing structure, and the answer for this one is yes. If we were to scroll down to the other chart before we even move on to the rest of the elements of the charts, the question is it co-located onto an existing structure? The orange chart says no. So then it follows a different procedure. So I'm going to scroll back up. And let me make it a little bit smaller so you can see all of the text, although I don't know if that's going to help you. Let me know if you want to see it larger.
Good for me.
Okay. So how do you want me to proceed with this? Do you want me to actually go through each individual box?
Well, let's stick with the issue of the sort of gatekeeper who gets the initial look at things and focus on that issue.
So I don't know that these charts actually addressed who gets the information. It just tells you what the requirements are, whether it needs site plan approval, special permit approval, or just a building permit. It doesn't say who actually gets the information.
What do we need to know, Susan, for drafting the law?
Well, I'm not sure that this chart actually is relevant to that. I think this chart might be more relevant to who makes the determinations that are in the law. And I can
Right.
tell you right away, this chart is outdated because it only talks about building permits. And now we've decided there are going to be these wireless facility permits that are issued. And among other things, they have to provide certifications that the facility as operated will comply with the FCC requirements for emissions, things like that. So, just a building permit alone, that wouldn't be enough to trigger that. So, we have much more now. So these charts are a bit outdated, but I guess the question, so if you want to talk about the gatekeeper, I'm not sure you really need to look at this. If you want to talk about who makes the determinations as to whether under our zoning criteria for aesthetics, impacts on historic districts, that kind of thing, who makes that determination and then makes the determination under the Telecommunications Act if they find that the system doesn't meet the requirements, the zoning requirement, when I say zoning, I mean like the aesthetics and design standards and those kinds of things. If they find it, they don't meet that, then you have to look at the Telecommunications Act and see whether you're effectively prohibiting service under the act. So there's a separate set of determinations you have to make. And so that's, I think we just need to know, do we have staff doing that some of the time? Do we have planning board doing it some of the time? How do we split that between them? Or do you want just the planning board to make those determinations all the time?
And so it seems like we should talk about the gatekeeper first. Just that'll be the chronological order of things, and then the other questions about steps beyond that we can do second. So if we don't need the charts for the gatekeeper question, Chris has stopped sharing the screen. So what do we need to talk about in terms of the gatekeeper for including in the draft? I'm trying to pull up the The Fishkill ordinance.
Yeah, the Fishkill ordinance, the section of it that Susan had included in the packet has a section 150-126.6. I don't know if the revised version changed the numbering, but it starts with application requirements. Applications for special permits under this chapter shall be made to the building inspector, who shall initially determine whether or not the application is complete and or free of defects upon receipt of the same. And that's what I was saying. In the town of Ithaca, that's traditionally the planning department. And that's
And-
what staff would recommend.
Okay, so let's talk about that then and see if the committee is fine with that staff recommendation. Committee members? I think I saw a thumbs up from Eric. I'm looking thumbs up from Yvonne. It looks like head nod yes from Pat. Head nod yes from Eva. And so and sounds fine to me. And that's the 5 of us that are here tonight. So sounds like that was an easy one. Was there more that planning and codes talked about that we should go over now?
Yeah, and I may be jumping ahead, so Susan will probably correct me, but we also talked about these factual determinations that need to be rendered for the items that the committee or the town chooses that are not going to be going to the planning board. Staff will then need to make these factual determinations, and some of them feel like they are a more important job than just one staff member to make the decision. I also don't know if we really want to go with the factual determinations language that Fishkill came up with. Some of the standards look a little bit like our special permit criteria, which would be completely appropriate for a planning board. Staff can make some of those determinations as well, but then there's some other things in here about potential adverse impacts upon real estate values. That is nothing that town staff is comfortable making a determination on. And I'm not sure our planning board would be comfortable making a determination on that. So we talked a little bit about that. Who would be doing what? We didn't come to a final decision though, other than we're not so sure that staff is comfortable making some of these determinations.
And so, so looking at what I have up on my screen for the factual determinations to be rendered in the Fishkill ordinance, it looks like they were being rendered by the planning board. At least that's what the title says, and then it goes through all the evidentiary standards and factual determinations and so forth. But the question for us is, should the planning board, and so I'm just quoting what Susan Brock had written here in her note, should the planning board make these determinations and approve the permits for all facilities, or should staff perform these actions for certain types of applications? So, in your discussions between codes and planning, did you have some recommendations? I heard you say you don't think staff should be making all of these.
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
some of it's a little confusing to me. I'll be completely honest. When I look at our approval process and aesthetic requirements sheet that goes with the flow chart, there are a number of criteria that either staff or the planning board would follow. And admittedly, they're aesthetic criteria. Can we, as staff, internally say there are no exposed wires? Sure. Are the antennas in a camouflage enclosure? Sure. I don't know if these are the same things, and this is a question for Susan maybe, that Andrew Campanelli put in as part of the factual determinations for Fishkill, in addition to these other strange things like real estate values. If they are the same, then staff is comfortable making the criteria determinations for aesthetic standards that we've set up. And we could easily say that we could easily evaluate character of the surrounding community, impacts on historic properties or historic districts, fall zones, and I'm looking again now at the Fishkill standards. But especially I come back to adverse impacts upon real estate values. That's not something staff would feel comfortable doing, even for the small cells. And I don't know, I haven't read the expanded Fishkill law that has all the design standards in it. So I don't know what else there is that Fishkill wants their staff to do or their planning board to do. But it does look like, and again, Susan can correct me if I'm wrong, it does look like everything is going to the planning board for the Fishkill law. We're not recommending that at this point.
And yeah, I had always thought, one of the things we wanted to accomplish, or that we talked about trying to do, was to take some of the burden off of the planning board and have staff do more. And Susan, it looked like you had unmuted for a second there, so you were going to jump in.
While Chris was talking, I just looked at the revised Fishkill law, and I don't think that local zoning determination section has been changed to reference the design standards. There is a reference to another section of their law, though, whether the proposed installation will meet each of the conditions and standards set forth in, and then, I think it's special permit criteria actually is what they're referring to there. I thought, well, maybe that's, I don't know. I thought maybe that somehow was going to pull in the design standards. So it's not clear to me how they're working those in. Maybe that's something that'll be in the next draft for them.
Pat, I see your hand.
Yeah, I actually unmuted. Maybe you saw that. This jumps ahead a little bit, so I don't know if we want to talk about this now, but I was going to bring it up later about the setback justification, but it ties into the property value issue. When I reviewed the minutes and everything that we talked about last time, and the point was made that everyone who's objected to a close setback, and that's been urging us to have a wider setback, they have been arguing about health concerns. And they've sent us lots of things over the months that communities around the country and around the world have kept expressing concerns about health impacts, about radio frequency radiation. And so even though we can't use that as a criteria for setbacks, the fact that there is a perception by many people that there are health concerns with these facilities could impact property values. So broadly. So that could be a justification for a wider setback, a longer setback, just in terms of, the ability, the attractiveness of a property if there's a cell facility nearby. So I was going to argue that the case could be made in terms of damage to property values generally, to set a wider setback than 300 feet. I don't know if you want to talk about that now, but since we were talking about that, this isn't, it wouldn't be an individual thing. I think generally the case can be made without being cynical that this widespread perception, this concern, which is a fact, the concern is a fact. Okay, so we would not be using health as the basis. We would be using the perception of concern, which is real and could really impact property values. So in order to preserve the property values, it would be safer to require a longer setback than 300 feet.
So let's talk a little bit about this property values issue. For those who are interested in looking at the Fishkill ordinance, on the excerpts of the Fishkill law that Susan Brock had sent us previously. It looks like this is under the factual determinations to be rendered by the planning board. And then the factual determinations under B, paragraph B, then they go on to list local zoning determinations. And then they have a whole list of local zoning determinations that their planning board is supposed to make factual determinations about. And one of them is number 3, which is potential adverse impacts upon real estate values. It's just one sentence, so I'll read it for folks. And so evidently what they're supposed to determine is whether the proposed installation will inflict a significant adverse impact upon the property values of properties that are located adjacent to or in close proximity of the proposed site, or properties that are otherwise situated in a manner that would cause the proposed installation to inflict a significant adverse impact upon their value. Now, so I know Chris, I think, just mentioned that in discussions between planning and codes, they didn't think that staff, this was one type of determination that staff could make. And so, but I'm just wondering, and I'll call on you, Chris. I just don't recall, did we have anything in any of our drafts or any of our discussions before about real estate value impacts? I know, we talked a lot about aesthetic considerations and all the talks of setbacks related to aesthetic considerations, but I don't recall us ever mentioning anything about real estate values. And I don't know, I don't believe, does our current telecommunications law say anything about real estate values? So that this would seem to be something new for us if we did have this as a determination. So let's have Chris jump in, and I'll see if Susan Brock wants to say anything before we have the committee start discussing what to do about real estate values. Chris?
Okay. I'll just add, when I read that paragraph, I think, okay, there now needs to be a specific list of criteria that you would choose or that you would need to prove that there's a significant adverse impact on property values. Because the paragraph written as it is very subjective. What are you going to use as evidence? So I just want to put that out there.
Susan Brock, any of your thoughts on property values?
Yeah, so one of the purposes in the law we drafted last year is to protect property values of the community. That's one of the purposes. I don't know if there was anything specific to findings and things like that, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go back into that law to see how much we got into real detail on that anyway. I don't remember off the top of my head whether our current section 219 for telecommunications facilities talks about property values. I can look while we keep talking. I think that if everything doesn't go to the planning board, the staff won't have the information they need to make a determination about real estate values. I think the thought is if it goes to the planning board, there would be a public hearing and the public would have the right to submit comments. And the planning board would get information that way, as they do for other projects. We sometimes have had people talk about impacts on property values. Maybe it's more at ZBA. We hear about things that, where we have realtors come in. But I don't know, Sue or Chris, if you remember, I think sometimes we've had realtors submit information and letters to planning board too. Certainly ZBA has seen them.
Yeah, ZBA has seen them because the area variance and use variance criteria sheets that are part of the application package for ZBA specifically state certain criteria to show as evidence, and real estate materials and
Right.
property values is one of those specific criteria.
Right, for use variance, you have to show that they sometimes show we've tried marketing this for X years, with under the permitted uses, and now we have not been able to use. But that's a little different. But I guess what I'm saying is, if real estate values are a criteria to be considered, you could expect realtors, residents who maybe want to oppose this particular application could get a realtor to submit information, or the realtor might come and test, make public comment on that. You could anticipate that. If you have some things going only to staff, I don't know how the staff would get that information. So there's sort of a built-in way to get that information if you have everything go to planning board.
Can I add?
yeah,
So
and then
I'm imagining an application that staff would prepare for the planning board, and if that question is there, we're not going to be able to answer it in advance.
Well, we could, in our application materials, we can look and see. It may be that these companies have their own property specialists who submit with their application information saying studies show these do not decrease the value. I think we saw that with our large facilities, didn't we? It's been a while since we've had one. Maybe we have something in our application that they have to provide some kind of information about that too. I don't know. Maybe not, because it may or may not be particularly useful, what they give us. That's probably something we need to think about a little more. Either way. And I'll look while everybody's talking and let you know if I find anything in our current code.
Yeah, I see Pat's hand, and then I'll see if other committee members want to jump in on this discussion on real estate values, and then I've got a couple of thoughts. So Pat?
Yeah, so I wasn't speaking about considering applications on a case-by-case basis. I was just saying that based on the public feedback we've gotten over the months, that we can sort of make a general assumption that there could be concerns among potential buyers of homes if they know that it is within 300 feet of one of these facilities, that there is so much concern out there that we can make a general requirement for a larger setback just based on the knowledge that we now have that it's out there, that there's a lot of public concern about it. And even though we can't say, oh, we want it a certain large distance because we're concerned about the health effects, we know now that many people are concerned about it. And generally, it would not be a good idea to site these facilities that close to any residential property because of the potential of difficulty finding buyers. So I was arguing that would actually be a legitimate reason to, in the law, just cite it greater than 300 feet. We've got 1,500 feet between facilities. We could do 1,500 feet from a residence just because of what we know now about a broad concern about health effects, even though we're not directly citing health effects. We're citing the perception that can impact property values generally. So it's not something that the planning board or staff would consider on a case-by-case basis. I'm saying in the law, we can use that as the reason, like we would use aesthetics. but I see it as, as a real general concern among people. And we can recognize that.
Yeah, so I think I understand a little bit better now, Pat, what you were asking about, because yeah, I had thought you were focusing on the individual determinations by staff or planning board on real estate value effects of a particular installation. But okay, I understand now you're talking about using the potential effect on property values, which we said is one of our goals and our intent of our law as a justification for a greater setback. So Eva, I saw your hand.
Well, I'm just a little bit concerned about doing something like that, because even though the perception among a lot of people is a certain way, I think we would need some support that those perceptions are based on facts that are real.
No, we can't. First of all, we can't because we're prohibited specifically from using health, our own belief. Okay, so health cannot be a reason for requiring a setback, but property values can be. And whatever the perception is, whether it's true or false, if enough people believe it, it can affect property values. And that's what the basis of this is, because it is very widespread, this concern. And has nothing to do whether it's true or false. There's a lot of people feel this way. Okay. And not just in Ithaca.
Yes,
So
I hear what you're saying, but I'm still just a little bit worried that the town could get into trouble using that sort of public perception. Are there some real estate facts of examples of this sort of thing happening?
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, from everything they sent us, you could say yes, but we're not allowed to consider that at all, whether it's true or false. I'm focusing on the real impact it would have on the sales value of a property if it's, within 300 feet of one of these facilities. There are enough people out there who believe that it's a problem and it would make it harder to sell a property.
I hear what you're saying about this particular case, but I guess what I'm asking, does anybody know about cases where property values have been affected by people's perceptions of other ideas, not this one?
Yeah.
Has it happened before? Is there precedent, I guess one could call it?
So asking about precedent does make, I see your hand, Yvonne, but makes me think that perhaps this might be a question to seek advice of counsel if we're trying to talk about precedent. So we might want to consider going into closed session to seek advice of counsel. Although I think I'd rather do that towards the end of the meeting, since we'll be going off of YouTube and get anything done in open session that we can on YouTube before we do that. But let's see, I saw Yvonne's hand, so let's see what she wants to ask, and then we can decide how we want to proceed.
Well, I just wanted to say that we do know that fracking has affected people's real estate values, and just the perception of the possibility of fracking, because they were talking about going underground into other people's property, has certainly affected property values. I don't know if that falls into the same category or not, but it is an interesting thought.
Eric, I'll give you an opportunity to say anything.
Well, what I would say in executive session, I don't think it's a good idea to say.
So I think we will do a a closed session to seek advice of counsel, so we can talk a little bit more about this then. Before we do that, I do want to finish the rest of the meeting on YouTube. So before we get off of YouTube, so I guess I'll say now, are there other items? So leaving the putting on the table for a few minutes the real estate values discussion. Are there other items that we want to be talking about now in terms of what staff is deciding on, or what we need to send to the planning board to decide on? Is there anything from the charts? Does this now relate to the charts we had, and what gets sent to the planning board for site plan approval or special permit?
Yes, so Bill, do you want the committee to discuss what they think should go to the planning board versus what internally should be taken care of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do some of that, and so why don't I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes, spend about 10 minutes on that, because then I want to, as I said, do about 10 minutes talking about 2022, and then we can end up with about 10 minutes in section.
Okay, do you want me to share my screen again, or will that make it confusing?
Does everybody have the have their copy on their computer or in front of them on hard copy, so we don't need to share it on the screen? As I mentioned to the folks on YouTube, you can go to the town's website to pick up the packet. So how do people want to see it on the screen, or do you have it already in front of you? I've got it in front of me, so I'm fine not sharing it.
I've got it open because I've got 3 monitors, so.
Lucky you. So yeah, well, we won't share it. Just tell us which page you're on, the yes page or the no page.
I'm going to start with the yes page.
Okay.
So the question is the proposed facility co-located onto an existing structure? We say yes. If it's co-located onto a communications tower, meaning the 150-foot tall ones, if the answer is, I'm just going to go to no, because that's where the only place where we have an internal review.
Mm-hmm.
It's not on a big tower. Is it a small wireless facility co-location? If yes, then if it's a new individual small wireless facility, then we're recommending internal planning staff review. If it's a system, like a distribution antenna system, a system of poles, then we're recommending site plan approval. That's for the yes, it's a small wireless facility co-location. If we go to the no, it's not a small wireless facility co-location, so it could be another type of antenna that's co-locating onto a building or something, then we would say it requires internal planning staff review. And then the required permits. Everything else in this chart would require, except for one exception, would require site plan approval and special permit. The only other exception is if it's a co-location on a large tower, the 150-foot towers, and I'm just using that number arbitrarily so that we can distinguish between that and a small cell, which is never going to be 150 feet tall. And there's not a substantial change, and the word substantial is in quotes because it's important. It's related specifically to FCC order number 6409A. If it's co-located on a large tower, but there's not a substantial change, then the FCC order says that the town shall approve, and it only requires a building permit. So that's the only situation where the town really has no, not jurisdiction, no discretion. We can't send that to the planning board. It has to be approved.
I think that might also apply to small wireless facilities, not just large towers.
Okay,
The section 6409A changes if they're not substantial.
okay. So and this is where we get back to, I might need to update this chart from the last time I did it. It's a complicated chart. It was not easy to do, but we got about 95% of it right. So there's that.
Yeah. And we have to update it to require the wireless facility permits regardless, not just building permits.
Right. Right. So that's the yes. I can move on to the no if people are ready.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question for no is the proposed facility co-located onto an existing structure? No, it's not. Is it a new small wireless facility? Yes, it is. Is it a new individual small wireless facility? Why, yes, it is. So it's just one little antenna, one little guy. That we're recommending, or the committee was recommending as of June last year, internal planning staff review and a permit. Everything else, is it on an existing structure? No. Is it a new small wireless facility? Yes, but it's not, but it's a system, not an individual one. That would require planning board review. Is it a small wireless facility? No. Then you're looking at a new tower, which is again, those 125, 150 towers. Those require site plan review and special permit by the planning board. I don't think anyone wants to see staff approve a new tower. I think that's appropriately should go to the planning board. And just for the members of the public that might be on YouTube, when we use the term tower, we are referring to the traditional monopole towers that are over 100 feet tall, not the 50-foot tall poles that the small cell units are being constructed on.
So, Chris, I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, because on my chart, it looks like so following the no's, so it's not co-located on a communications tower, no. And then is it a small wireless facility? No. Then it looks like it just requires internal planning staff review. Am I reading the chart wrong?
You are. Are you looking at the chart on the orange side or the green?
Oh, I was looking at the green. Oh, I
I color coded them.
didn't. I didn't flip it. I didn't flip it over. Okay, I caught up.
Okay.
Um,
I apologize. There's no truly easy way to present this information unless we have a lot of time to do it. So.
right. So what do we need from the committee about this then? Do we need to make some changes to this and need to get committee input on what changes we might want to make to this? I see Susan shaking her head yes.
Yeah, I would say I'd like to know if the committee still feels the same way that they did a year and a half ago, that these smaller units could be internally reviewed by staff, or if the committee would like the planning board to look at everything, which even if the planning board doesn't want to look at everything, it's fine if the committee chooses that this law has the planning board look at everything.
Committee members, let us know your thoughts. I mean, as I've said before, in general, I'm fine with having the planning board have to deal with this less and taking up less of their time on this. But what are other people thinking?
Well,
Eva, and then Eric.
I feel this is really complicated stuff, but
It
I
is,
think
it
that
is.
I think really that there are some things that can be left to staff to decide because there are enough guidelines about how to do it. It doesn't need the kind of looking over it that the planning board does for everything.
Eric, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you and now Eva. I think that where we can cut red tape and make things a little easier and also rely on the expertise of staff to move things along quicker, we should do it. And so, yeah, I agree.
Yvonne or Pat? Yvonne is our planning board rep.
Yeah. I wonder how many of these small individual wireless facilities we might anticipate coming through. Do we have any idea?
There was a time when I started learning about this, and this was a few years ago, where I saw publications where municipalities could expect hundreds of these, and I panicked inside. And then I later learned that that's really for much more densely developed municipalities. So I honestly don't know what the town of Ithaca can expect for these.
Right. Yeah.
I'm assuming that when somebody comes to us, they're going to be wanting to put up a bunch of these. And so that would be considered a system, right?
Yes, generally, although I can't say that for sure anymore.
Pat, any thought?
So we're really looking at small facilities. That's how this started, right? Yeah. Well, if the planning staff thinks they can handle it, sure. I mean, a lot of it sounds like, with the flow chart, it sounds like it's pretty ministerial. It's not something the planning board would have to look at. But if it's complicated and requires a lot of judgment, then the planning board would need to look at it. So I'm not sure.
If I may, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could consider, this just occurred to me, if we could consider adding a caveat in the law, like we do with the sign law, where it's an internal staff review, but leaves the discretion of the director of planning to send it to the planning board if they feel it needs to go there. And I'm looking at Susan Brock. Is that something that will make the law more complicated?
Well, didn't we just do that with something else? I forget what.
We did it with revising the sign law.
But I think even there was something else where we just some other law maybe where we talked about that. I forget what it was, but
Wasn't there something where if the staff was going to deny something, it could be sent to the planning board? Was that the sign law or sign review?
That was the sign law.
Okay.
Maybe that's what I'm.
We could look at that as a model too. And the thing is, we have shot clocks, so there may not be a lot of time to run it through staff and planning board.
And the board.
And public, notice the public hearings and all of that. So in a way, it's better to just, if it's with staff, it's with staff. And if it's with the planning board, it's with the planning board. And then, because you just don't have a lot of time for some of these.
And
Well, the staff has to review it anyway, right?
before planning board.
Before the planning board.
Yeah, but if they review it and then they find that they need to send it to the planning board and then they have to get it on an agenda and, and then you have to get the public hearing noticed and you can't, if 2 days before the meeting, they determine, oh, this should go to the planning board, it's too late. You can't get your notice in time for the public hearing.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. I mean, one thought I had, which everybody may not like, is just maybe just try sending everything to the planning board initially, see how it goes, see how much is coming to them. And once there's some experience actually applying the law, determine whether certain applications really don't need to go there. And at that point, staff would have a better feeling for how they could handle it too. I don't know if that's a great suggestion or not, but so I just throw that out there for you to consider.
Eva?
I think I like that idea. So I will I will adjust what I said to that, because it's better with all the time constraints that there are for all these things that are processed by the time. It's better for it not to be rushed anywhere and to go through a trial period and to sort out what things really are easy enough to be handled by staff only from the ones that need planning board review. So I like that idea.
Yvonne? Is that-
I said this last time and I'll say it again. If all of this is going to the planning board, there has to be some really good training that happens beforehand, because I think it's complicated and we're not prepared for it.
So just to make sure I'm clear, we're on the orange side. We're talking about, is it a new individual small wireless facility? And if the answer is yes, the current chart says internal planning staff review. Because the other ones already say requires planning board. Is staff thinking that this one should be changed on the chart, and so this one also should require planning board? What's staff's thoughts?
Not necessarily. This originally came up because we had, and I love using this example because it's a good example. There's this one little cell antenna on top of the roof of the Country Inn and Suites. It does link into a network insofar as all of the wireless cell antennas in the town link into some network or another, but it's not part of a system of small antennas that are going up all around buildings all at the same time. And this went to the planning board, and the planning board didn't even need to review the antenna itself because it met the dimensions. It met the dimension of the streamline provisions that just requires a building permit. The only reason why this particular facility had to go to the planning board was because their equipment shelter, which was just this tiny little generator cabinet thing, right next to the Country Inn and Suites, required planning board approval. And so that started getting staff and the planning board thinking, why does the planning board, what's the land use planning implication for these teeny tiny one-off cell antennas going to the planning board? I mean, what does the planning board need to evaluate that staff can't evaluate in those cases? So, Bill, to answer your question directly, if it's a new individual small cell wireless facility, then, and it's just one, then yes, staff is saying that we would do the internal staff review, provided that we have the correct criteria and enough criteria to
Right.
follow.
Yvonne?
Well, I guess that's what I was going to say too, is that there really had to be some criteria, something that, you were able to say, yeah, this definitely falls into this category. And it does, I think it makes sense for the staff to be doing the ones like the one that you're talking about, Chris. That seems silly for that to come to the planning board. I agree with that. But I think there needs to be a lot of criteria that goes with it. thought.
Eva?
Well, it sounds also as if those criteria would need to be provided to the planning board too. They have to be there for anybody who talks, discusses, and decides about this. And I agree with you that the planning board would need some extra training to deal with these things that are so complicated.
And so I think I want to wrap up this discussion. I don't know if we've created any more clarity for how to move forward with the draft. And so I guess we'll have to continue that. But I do want to move on to talking about 2022, and then we'll do a closed session to seek advice of counsel. And at that point, we'll be turning off the YouTube, and then we'll end the meeting after that. So we won't come back to YouTube, and won't come back to open session. So let's turn now to in the packet at the very end. There was the I believe the dates, the potential dates for next year if we continue on the second Wednesday. Is that what these dates are, Chris? It looks like, yeah, second Wednesday in 2022. I do want to acknowledge at this point that Pat will not be with us in 2022 because her town board term ends the end of this month. And so I do want to thank you, Pat, for all of the many years you've been on COC. I believe you've been on it since I got on COC 12 years ago, and I assume you might have been on it even before then.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So,
Been one of my favorites.
so probably 14 years at least that Pat has been on it. So thank you, Pat. And I'm sorry that we are on Zoom and I can't give you a cupcake or something, but I'll try and give you some little treat to acknowledge your service sometime soon, hopefully when we can get together in person. And then also, and I'm not sure, since Bill is not here, I'm not exactly sure what his plans are. I had heard that he might not be on COC. And so, Marty, I don't know if you know any more details about that. But we'll have to find out. And then Yvonne, I think I've heard that you're willing to stay on COC at least through the end of telecommunications. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we'll be losing Yvonne soon, but at least you'll be with us probably for a couple more months, because I think it's going to take us probably a couple more meetings to get through telecommunications. But it's possible we might have 2 new people on COC in January. So, we can revisit some things for them, but I think I just want to check and see with the rest of us who are here, does the second Wednesday still work for people? And then if so, I do have one particular item I want to talk about in terms of conflict with my schedule, but Yvonne and Eva and Eric, for the time that you're here in the new year, Yvonne, how second Wednesday work, and also staff, obviously, too. People still wanting to try and keep it on second Wednesday?
Yeah, it's fine for me.
Okay. So looking at the particular dates, then I know at least this winter, I think everybody knows I'm not going to be deputy supervisor anymore. So with some of my newly found free time, I'm hoping to just start doing some more travel. Obviously, it's all COVID dependent, and see what happens. But currently, it looks like I might be gone both February 9th, out of town February 9th and March 9th. Not on one long continuous trip, but on two separate trips. So I wanted to see if perhaps we could in February and March either shift those dates back a week or I guess forward a week to the 15th. Would that be, no, 16th? Then would that be a week, February 16th and March 16th? I guess some of it also, I guess, depends for me on whether we're still doing Zooms. Because if we're doing Zooms, I could, I could probably still do the meetings from where I'm going to be at by Zoom, but we won't know. I don't know when the governor's gonna, decide whether to extend the executive order but beyond January 15th or not. Maybe we just look now at February and try and plan something for February and leave March. We can deal with that later on as we get closer to March. But so let's say in February, are folks available on the third Wednesday, the 16th of February instead of the 9th? I see heads nodding, so it looks like, yeah. So for our schedule for at this point, at least, why don't we say that in February we'll do that third Wednesday, the 16th, and then we can talk about March and other future dates as we get closer. Anybody have any other issues with any of the dates or?
I know I don't count because I'm just staff, but I will be out of town for between February 8th and the 15th. So, but other planning staff will take care of the mail out.
But you'll be back on Wednesday, the 16th for the meeting itself?
Unless this is traditionally the time of year when I go visit my parents in Florida. So if there's a snowstorm, then I might not make it back.
Of course, you can always do it by Zoom.
That's absolutely right. So don't worry about me. I just thought I'd mention it just as an aside.
But yeah, if the February 16th works for other folks, why don't we keep it for that? I'm assuming at that point we'll still be doing telecommunications, so we'll still just be going over the materials that we've been looking at already. In January, obviously, as we talked about before, in January, it looks like we'll take a little break, not a total break. I assume we'll do some discussion of telecommunications in January, but we'll also be discussing the energy code supplement. So the entire meeting in January will not be telecommunications. We'll have some other items to talk about. And so any other questions about 2022 from anybody? If not, then I think I will make a motion to go into closed session to seek advice of counsel. Does somebody want to second that? Eric seconds. Any discussion? If no discussion, all in favor? Okay. And so I'm going to be going off YouTube now. For folks who are watching us on YouTube, we will not be coming back into open session. So this is the end of the YouTube recording. So if you're watching this at a future time, there won't be an additional recording for the end of the meeting. This is the end of our meeting.
So, yeah, right. So this is the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
And you're just going to be seeking advice of counsel. Right. The meeting is now
Adjourned.
Right. Adjourned. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so I can just stop the recording completely.
And yeah, it doesn't need to be paused because so I'm going to